We have a rare privilege and treat this evening, after the sober doings of the rest of the conference. We have a scion of the Hubbard family. I mean, what a privilege that is. The thought that, on the one hand, we had an evil, tyrannical monster who somehow, his genes have gone down a few generations here to make this quite remarkable man who is now making a career out of lampooning his own great-grandfather. Have you ever heard of such a thing before? You know, did Caligula have a... So, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce to you Jamie DeWolf.
Thanks, sir. Good evening, everybody. How y'all doing? So before I start, there's a few things that I'm going to read. Some are pretty fucking serious and grim and intense. Before I do that, though, I just wanted to say, honestly, it's been amazing to be here and meet a lot of people who, to me, are actually heroes. Everybody that's in this room is incredibly brave. Most of the world doesn't even know or understand how much risk it takes to even walk into this room and to consort with other such undesirables, and to have them all in one room where conveniently, if they just burn this fucking theater to the ground, that a whole lot of problems would end for the cult of Scientology at once. But it's been amazing for me to meet a lot of people that I've only heard about, or I've heard their stories, and I've been able to interview some people and you know, hear their tales and how they got out and what they're doing to help and everything else. So I just want everybody to give a round of applause to everybody who's put this event together and everyone that's here in this room. So the first thing I'm going to do is something that probably I would assume many of you have already seen. It was one of the first pieces that I ever did against Scientology. So my general history of Scientology is I first performed about it in 2000, and somebody recorded it, they put it online, and immediately Scientologists came to my door pretending that they were fellow artists and that they just wanted to find me and talk to me with some questions about shows. My mom recognized them immediately on our porch and kicked them the fuck out, and she said she recognized them by their blank shark-like eyes, is what she would call it. And for many years, I didn't really know how to tackle Scientology artistically, which is to me what mattered the most. I felt that as someone who did not grow up as a Scientologist, I didn't want to cheapen anybody else's own experience, their own trauma, their own survival stories, and I sure as hell never wanted to seem like I was trying to make a buck off L. Ron Hubbard. I've had people actually state that to me, and that I'm just trying to exploit my family lineage, and it makes me laugh of how many fucking years I've stayed 10 million miles away from it, because trust me, there is no money in Scientology. It is not an awesome thing to be related. There are 5 other arch criminals of the world I'd much rather be related to than a megalomaniac, portly, chain-smoking, pathological fucking liar. It's not particularly a sexy thing to ladies, you know what I mean? I'd much rather be related to Billy the Kid, or Richard Ramirez the fucking Night Stalker, or Charles Manson. Would get me way more action, trust me, with the girls that I date, than saying I'm related to this enigmatic science fiction writer, pseudo con man, megalomaniac, who the fuck knows what, paranoid, schizophrenic, manic depressive, sociopathic, still trying to figure that out. So there's never really been a positive in any of my life of talking about L. Ron. But as they are filming this for, I don't know, whatever reasons, time capsules for
Children's TV.
Children's TV. Sure. Adjust the wires and umbilical cords. So this is a piece that I wrote very quickly, and I just got to a point where I realized I was fed up not talking about it, because I realized whether I wanted to avoid it or evade it, that it was still intrinsically part of me, and it had to change and influence probably nearly literally everything in my life, whether I wanted to admit it or not. So if you've heard this piece before, then bear with it. It's pretty simple. But if you haven't, then this is for those who haven't. And it's, of course, designed for people who don't know shit. Every family has their black sheep. On my mother's side, our black sheep was a shepherd who enslaved his own flock. The king of the Khans, a man who made himself a messiah, even though he never called himself a god. Even tonight, his words are written in titanium steel in a nuclear-reinforced bunker hidden miles underground, so if our whole species goes extinct, his words will still survive. He was a subject we never talked about at the kids' table at family reunions, but he was my great-grandfather, L. Ron Hubbard. Lafayette Ron Hubbard. He started as a storyteller, a science fiction writer, a golden-tongued grifter with a gift of gab who could write a book in an hour in any genre while the publisher waited downstairs in the hotel lobby. Just another name on dime store pulp mags, paid only a penny a page, until 1949 when he said, "You want to know how you really get rich? You start a religion." A year later, he kept to his word, wrote Dianetics, transforming science fiction into fact until you could pay to flatline your mind for a fee. Overnight, he went from pennies to a profit until the world demanded to see his evidence. But L. Ron knew if you don't have facts, all you need is faith. So he transformed his science into a religion, and Scientology was born. A few years later, his son arrived. Abandoned as his father sought fame and fortune, born premature at 2 pounds, 3 ounces, now his son emerged to take his part of the new family business. He was my grandfather, L. Ron Hubbard Jr. Carrying his father's name in his red hair, became his right-hand disciple and helped him construct the cult for years until he realized he was only another accomplice. Trained in the arts of electrified hypnosis, beatdowns, and blackmail, it took him a decade to see the holes behind the holy, the man behind the myth, his father. Stuffing thousands of dollars in a shoebox he kept hidden underneath his bed, his father. Burning incriminating documents before dawn, his father. Escaping criminal charges as he ran from state to state as Junior watched his friends, banks broken, brains washed, sickened by what he had seen behind the curtain. In 1959, Junior left. But his father always understood retribution better than redemption. So he stalked his son with wiretaps, break-ins, and death threats. Junior coming home to a mailbox full of pictures of his children playing alone and unguarded on empty playgrounds to remind him the eye of the pyramid never blinks. While all my aunts and uncles were taught how to use a gun, the son forced to live like his father, permanently on the run until he changed his last name from Hubbard to DeWolf. A lie to protect him from ever having to tell the truth. When your father has created a religion in your own lifetime, there's no sun big enough to ever escape his shadow. But there's a thin line between prophecy and psychosis, and the barefaced Messiah ran, an international outlaw on a ship, escaping extradition, his sanity slipping until he could no longer tell his own past from fiction, until one day, he vanished before a courtroom or a jail cell could ever make him real again. Junior, now buried under deck, litigated the Holy Ghost to prove he still had flesh. Junior, now a dying diabetic with an amputated foot, battered from a decade of lawsuits against the man who carried his same name, until the night his father died, cremated in the morning, leaving only a legacy of ashes. So then the church offered the son their final offer: arrest your tongue, swallow the truth for one last check, or you and your next of kins will suffer a lifetime of threats. So he signed away his silence and took his secrets and 2 heart attacks to his grave. Another victim the church stopped pretending to save. On Thanksgiving, in a house a self-made God paid for, his great-grandchildren never said his name. He was the one God we never gave grace to. One day when he was still alive, my grandfather took me to a bookshelf, showed me volume after volume of his father's works, and he said, "Your mom says you want to be a writer. Well, don't believe everything you read, but believe everything you say." I never met the man who gave me my red hair and the manic depression still twisted in the strains of my DNA. And the first time I saw a psychiatrist, and he asked me if mental illness runs in my family, all I could say was, "Yup, fuck yes it does." When I told him that my great-grandfather was a cult leader who would enslave the minds of millions, he accused me of having delusions of grandeur. What can I say? It runs in the family. I've gone in secret to L. Ron Hubbard life exhibits, taken on a tour of a life he never led, my family written out of existence. And his latest victim will never know the legacy of lies I still carry in my last name. DeWolf, a cover story to protect us from his true children. The army of empty who greet me in train stations with a personality quiz and an e-meter, their red-haired God grinning from some back book cover, and they ask me if I've ever heard of L. Ron Hubbard. And I always want to ask him, which one? The Son or the Father? The God or the man? Thank you. Oh. Thank you. It's much better with music, but in either case, you can find the version with music online. What was important to me about when I performed that piece for the very first time is my mother was in the audience, and she was a little terrified. I actually didn't tell her what I was going to be doing. I just said, "Mom, I have this show. It's super important to me that you come. I really need you in the audience." And she was like, "My God, that's wow." Because I rarely invite her to shows. Most of the time, I don't want to get myself in trouble. So I'm like, "Mom, you don't want to come to this one." But I asked her to be in the audience, but I did not tell her, I don't even think she knows this. I did not tell her what I was going to be doing because I knew that she would be scared. She might not show up. She might think it was, because it's to my mom in particular, this is not her favorite subject to talk about. And so when I was performing it, all I could focus on was that how important it was for me to tell the story from my family because no one in my family will talk about it. I'm the only one that will talk about it. Maybe because I'm fucking crazy. I don't know. But I mean, for the rest of them, it does not seem like a smart or sane decision to even go close to it. But the first time I performed it, when I said L. Ron Hubbard in the beginning for the first time, the whole audience roared with laughter. And I thought about that a lot after I performed the piece, because as I continued going, I would watch their faces go from this sort of weird, quizzical merriment to slow, frozen horror, and them looking at each other and being confused. And even after I performed the piece, they asked me, "Is that true? Are you really related to L. Ron Hubbard?" And I asked them, why the fuck would I make that up? What possible benefit is there to be related to a megalomaniac, paranoid, asshole motherfucker with his entire army of, there's no benefits to just pretending it, trust me. But I realized that laughter and why the piece is so important was, to them, L. Ron was this mythical figure. It was like talking about a folk hero like Paul Bunyan or someone else that didn't exist. Someone that they had heard about, but he was never a flesh and blood person. And that's why I realized that the piece is so important, is that my family and how I explain it to most people is I'm not just related to L. Ron Hubbard, I'm related to 2 L. Ron Hubbards. In fact, 3 L. Ron Hubbards. And to me, that fact of flesh immortality and the fact that he had a son that was named after him, that he bred in his own image and then eventually abandoned, and then abandoned twice, and then his son came after him and would flip-flop and then, fight back and forth with his father. And in the end, they were basically locked in this horrific end game where Junior, some people don't even know, almost collapsed all of Scientology by trying to flush L. Ron out of hiding. If you talk to many people like Jesse Prince and so forth who were in deep at that time, that was fucking terrifying to them. And L. Ron Hubbard Jr. was not a story that they wanted known, right? And I'm going to read some of Junior's writings here in a moment, which is going to make you want to take a bath in baths or battery acid. But I had another piece which is about actually meeting one of my heroes who's actually in this room. Who's probably going to factually correct me after some of this, but I'll do my best. It's called In the Blood. In an empty theater in Vancouver, Canada, I'm about to meet the man who discovered my family's most dangerous secrets. He arrives with 2 men for security and tells me our enemies already know I'm here. He says they track flights and have dossiers prepared to destroy me, and he should know. He's been beaten, sued into silence, banished from our country. If he says my great-grandfather's name out loud in America, it's a $50,000 fine. If he sets foot in the States again, he wins a jail sentence. His name is Jerry Armstrong. This man has been hunted and haunted. This man has been hunted and haunted every day of his life since he found my great-grandfather's boxes of secrets. He's met 4 generations of my family, but I'm the last descendant who wants to hear about my childhood hero, L. Ron Hubbard. When I was a kid, L. Ron Hubbard had his own bookshelf in my room. His neon name glowed off spines with covers full of laser gun-armed aliens and rocket ships blasting off into space. To be honest, he was my greatest inspiration. I'd type on my knees in my pajamas until my mom said lights out and fall asleep, dreaming of one day having my own books next to his. My mother would tell me that writing was in my blood. And I'd ask her, well, why doesn't Grandpa Ron show up at Christmas like Grandpa Ken? She told me he was busy somewhere out there writing just like me. I'd imagine him working on the next novel in a dark cabin somewhere. The only stories I knew of his were the ones that were on my bookshelf. My mother always said that the Bible had all the answers I would ever need. In the 3rd grade, I stood with Pastor Pete from my church on a street corner, passing out pamphlets, begging strangers to convert to my God. At the end of the day, he gave me a dog-eared book on cults, saying these were our enemies, and I needed to know them. I read about Mansons, Moonies, and Mormons before I turned the page and saw the word kept from me my entire life, Scientology. And above it was my great-grandfather, L. Ron Hubbard, founder, leader, reincarnated savior of a dying world. I'd never heard this story, the one he told the world. He was raised on a huge cattle ranch, blood brother of Indians, traveler of the Orient, nuclear physicist, screenwriter, CIA agent, submarine commander, barnstormer, machine gun in the back and blind in World War II, resurrected to sight by his own studies of the mind, scientist and last glimmer of hope in an apocalyptic world. My 8-year-old mind thought, Jesus, water-walking Christ, I am related to the most amazing man on earth. And he was still alive. I could find him. Just like my neighbor's cat and my runaway hamster Tigger, I could find him. I asked my mom that day for the first time about Scientology. She dropped the plate and told me to get a broom. When I came back, she was peeking through the curtains. Closed the window and she asked me, "Where did you hear that word, honey? Has someone been following you?" I showed her Pastor Pete's book and begged her to meet this amazing man so I could ask him about the submarines and Indians and rocket ships and how I could learn to write just like him. She told me he hadn't been seen in a long time. She says, some people don't want to be found. That night I went to bed angry. I didn't understand why he wouldn't want to meet his biggest fan. I just wanted to hear his stories from his own lips. He died when I was 9 years old before I could ever ask him anything. Today, when I say his name out loud, people laugh or their eyes widen. His name has become a funhouse mirror, an author who wrote his own empire. They ask if I'm making it up. Why would I? My lineage has never gotten me a date. Now he's a Tom Cruise pop culture reference, a South Park joke. But in my family, he's not a John Travolta punchline. He's something to bury, a whisper in the back rooms to be kept from the kids. After decades of slamming the door on news cameras, my family scattered across the country. His children kept his scriptures locked away in the attic or under the bed before their kids could find them. Pictures of him had already been taken off the walls years before. My mother never met her grandfather. He held her as a baby, but she had changed her maiden name before I was born. She grew up with tapped phones, break-ins, cars following them until dawn. Silence was an exit strategy, an escape plan. 30 years later, I asked the questions that the family had buried behind new last names and someday when you're older, until I found the man who found the box of secrets. Jerry was a disciple of my great-grandfather. He signed his soul over to Scientology for 1 billion years. When I was 3 years old, this believer was on a secret base, shredding millions of documents before the FBI could find him when he found 21 boxes in the attic. 21? 21 boxes in the attic, all the evidence of his Savior's life. Notebooks, photographs, journals, medical records. He hid them from the FBI, asked his leader through secret phone drops and coded messages if he could write the book so that the world could finally see his hero as he did. L. Ron gave him the green light. To this day, Jerry wonders why. Because in those boxes was the true face of my great-grandfather, the degrees he never achieved, the military exploits that never saw action, 3 decades of lies. Now in Vancouver, his fallen disciple asked me if I really want to know. By asking, I put my life in danger, my daughter's life. I need to know. This man is in my blood. I'm a writer. I need to hear the story. Where was he when I was a child? For most of it, Jerry tells me, he was on the run, then dying in a desert. While I was reading his science fiction books on lazy Sunday afternoons, my great-grandfather was only hours away in hiding, his teeth rotting, his red hair gone a straggly gray in a trailer lined with millions of dollars in cash. Jerry watched my great-grandfather have his underlings thrown overboard. He says L. Ron didn't create a church. He invented a school for psychopaths. The man I wanted to find was already lost. He was a self-made king lording over cruise ships with prepubescent teen disciples in hot pans, catching the ashes from his non-filter cool cigarettes. He mutated into a recluse who needed every shirt washed 13 times before he could finally wear it. My science fiction hero spent his last 2 years in self-invented therapy, talking to the alien souls who possessed his body. He was the last believer of his own lies. We talked for 5 hours until Jerry's voice is gone. I thank him for giving me the missing chapters. He tells me to write the next one. When L. Ron Hubbard died, my family never got flowers, but Los Angeles sold out the Palladium. They announced my great-grandfather flew off to outer space to write his next story. My family wasn't invited. Now my mother tells me that she also used to write hundreds of letters to him when she was a child. He never answered. He's been dead for almost 3 decades, but his followers still fight to defend his ghost. My daughter rolls her eyes when I mention his name. She says she doesn't want her friends to hear about being related to some crazy guy from a real long time ago. Doesn't make her popular in school. His myth is fading in my own lifetime. 12 blocks away from a BART station by my work, his theater and his shrine still stand. Movie stars and millionaires read his books like I did, but they never ask about his bloodline. You're looking at it. His DNA is in the flesh. I'm a walking piece of evidence that he can't erase. Reporters, disillusioned disciples, the brainwashed and battered hunt for the man behind the myth, and now his followers accuse me of trying to steal his name. But I'm just a writer like he was, telling the only story that he could never tell himself. Thanks. playing around with me. So I went out to Clearwater for the second time, and shortly before I went to Clearwater, I had a family member when I was randomly on a trip, happened to be at their house, and they said, oh, you know, how's that Scientology thing? You still interested in that? And I said, yeah, I'm still interested in that, trying to find out more. I said, you know, I found something in the garage that Junior left around, and I don't know, you might be interested in it. They walk up, I'm eating a plate of eggs just on a morning. Boom, drops this huge manuscript that I've never seen in my life. I'm like, what is this? Oh, I don't know. I said, have you read it? Yeah, but it's kind of dark and creepy, so I was like, ugh, but you might like it. I start flipping through it, and I realize it's one of the only copies of L. Ron Hubbard Jr.'s memoir that was never released. So he started writing it near the end of his life, and it's hard to even explain everything that's in it. I won't go into everything that's in it, not on this night, but someday I will, but it's pretty shocking. And one thing I've always been fascinated by, and one thing I'm trying to understand, is I feel that the story of L. Ron and L. Ron Hubbard Jr. is actually one of the most integral stories of Scientology. Partly because L. Ron was such a narcissist, clearly, that he named his first son after himself. And when his first son showed up, being 18, 19 years old, had the same physical build as L. Ron, same red neon hair, and he basically viewed him as clay that he could mold in his own image. He already had his name, already had his hair, and he also started, and they unified basically right in the very early days of Scientology, when L. Ron was still trying to figure it out. And his son, by his own accounts, had no problem being the right hand of L. Ron. And if that meant putting a fist through somebody's face, he would do it. And I think that their relationship was so integral, in a way, a microcosm of Scientology's history itself. You have someone that he molds into his own image, and then after a while they begin to see who you are as the human being behind it. And then if you eventually try to illuminate that or reveal that to the world, he's going to destroy you at everything, in every possible way that he can. So what I'm going to read you is part of his memoir. I'm not going to read every line from it. I've crossed out some elements of it. It's pretty fucking dark, but I think one of the most important aspects of it is it shows a different mindset to who L. Ron was originally, and this would be the L. Ron after he got off stage. And that was Junior's point, and the point of the black magic nexus, which I think is one of the most important parts to understand. I don't believe in black magic, but I do believe that L. Ron did, and that it was the fuel to everything that happened after it. So, this is L. Ron Hubbard Jr. I am the Son of God. I mislead you I am the Son of God. I mislead you slightly. I'm the son of the man who creates gods. Again, I mislead you slightly. I'm a son of the man who created and founded Dianetics and Scientology, which creates gods. I'm a son of L. Ron Hubbard. This book is my dying declaration, my last will and testament. My Father will order my death. My Father does not use the word murder. He prefers to use the word suicide. I'll give you a full tour, a tour that will cost you only a little sanity, a little reality, a queasy stomach maybe, even an erection, an aching clitoris, a hard nipple or two. You may want to rush into the nearest church or run out of one. A view on this tour will make a terminal ecstasy or permanent celibacy. Let me continue. I am his son, and at one time the heir to his throne. I left the orgs, as they are called, November 23rd, 1959 at 9 a.m. sharp, while I was at our headquarters in Washington, D.C., 1812 19th Street. At that time, I fully intended to entirely forget the whole sorry mess. the con, the mountains of bullshit and beast shit. I tried. I failed. I am still failing. The branding irons have left their scars deep, strong, and very visible, but put away your Kleenex and straitjackets. I don't start anything I can't finish. If some butt-sprung candy ass from Scientology's Guardian's office, Sea Org, or Flag wants to have a go again at stopping me, let him. This whole book is being written by my hand while I sit in front of an open window with a clear line of fire. My telephone number is in the phone book, and if that's not enough, I've informed them through a variety of ways I'm writing this book. I've also written Dad through private channels telling him of my intentions. I never bluff. I also fully intend to deliver a copy of this book to my father, L. Ron Hubbard, my hand to his hand. At this writing, he is 70 years old and will shortly turn 71 on his birthday, March 13th. That's why I'm in such a rush to get this written. I don't want him dying on me. I want him to stay very healthy and alive for several reasons. 1, I want to give him a copy of this book person to person. 2, I want him to read this book cover to cover, every last word of it. 3, I think this one's important, I don't want him to become a martyr. I want him and his complete history laid out before the peoples of this world, every last inch of the labyrinth exposed to public view. 4, I want to see him in court, civil and criminal. I want him in the dockets of justice. Justice by, under, and for the law of the courts for this world, not his law. I want man to judge him before he drops his body and goes sailing off with his beast. Now, all these reasons sound high and mighty, noble, brave, or some stupid nonsense. Bullshit. But why do I have these 4 reasons? I'll answer in 4 words. I know the man. I know the man probably better than anyone else, including his present wife and their children. To answer another way in 3 words, I was there before the beginning. Let's get a few things straight right off the bat. I'm a shit. I really am a mystic and a street fighter. Just like Dad, I'll take on the whole world if I have to, and I like to. I've been in constant active guerrilla war since I left my godship. At war with not just Dad, but with governments, media, and other assorted types. This army of people have a hard time with me because, name change or not, I'm still a Hubbard. And just when people think they have me or Dad brought to the ground or in a box, we click into the realms of the great beast. This isn't science fiction. We are mind fuckers, real mind fuckers in the real world. I mentioned earlier about Dad ordering my death and that I had doubts about finishing this book. There's no doubt he will come gunning for me in as many ways and as often as possible. We have been at war for over 20 years. I don't see why I should stop now. When he sees I've disclosed our secret of secrets, he and his beast will come crashing through my door, taking the hinges with it. Make no mistake about it, my friends. Dianetics in Scientology is the largest, oldest, most powerful cult in existence. He has hordes of people in cash. The house odds are in his favor. That's all. I've always been ready, willing, and able to put my life where my mouth is. But come out, Daddy. Come out wherever you are. Pick your weapons in battleground. I have a book to give you. This book. I must really laugh. All these mortals running around trying to get you in your body in jail, in a court. Ants going bananas trying to nail your hide to the barn door to stop and shut you down. You and I both know better. As long as you have your money and your beast, you will keep on trucking. Sit out there in some land on some sea and laugh and laugh and laugh. As long as I have my beast, I'll keep coming after your ass. Kill you? Never. Beat you to a pulp? Never. For that would dirty my hands. You should know, Dad, we are both 10 equals 1 ipsissimus, IPSISSIMUS of the 3rd order of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The only difference between us and other members is we made it work. We made it produce. Yes, I know, Dad, you said not to hundreds of times. You tried to alternately appease and threaten me for years. You tried to blow me away at least twice that I know of, plus a few dozen other tries at me using your full assortment of your private and public playbooks. It's around 120 times in 20 years. Your name is branded on the hearts, mind, and souls of millions of people. How can they keep your name out of it? How can they keep your name out of their shattered, broken, and torn lives, hopes, and dreams? Answer that question publicly to my face, and I might consider it. What the hell is Dianetics and Scientology? It's a religion of self. It's one man's religion, one man's labyrinth, a trip of L. Ron Hubbard's, a trip he lays on everyone else's, the trip, their trip, your trip, a science fiction story he wrote and forced into reality within the heads of others by the will of L. Ron Hubbard. The self-created fantasy of one man brought to deadly reality for others by a simple word, agreement, which I think is important. What LRH drummed into my head by his magic tech was, do what you wilt shall be the whole of the law. Do only that which satisfies the will. I didn't find out myself consciously. That is until mid-December 1952, when my father was giving a series of lectures in Philadelphia. Not from the lectures, privately in his hotel room. He deemed it proper at that time to openly initiate me into his sources. He gives me the first in a series of books and content to be kept forever secret. He says to reveal them is to cause instant insanity, rip my mind apart, destroy me, he warns. Secrets, techniques, and powers he alone has conquered and harnessed. I listen with hypnotic fascination. The books, some recently republished, some over 1,200 years old, some 5,000 years old. Gifts, he said. He's excited, fearful, cautious. Unimparted secrets imparted for the first time. I opened the books, intending to only thumb through in awed and amazed. I know these books. How could I? He answers, they were used to conceive you and birth you too. I've read them to you while you were asleep, drugged too, hypnotized too, for years. Katie too, and Polly too, scores of women, blood and pain women, my scarlet women, he says. Souls torn open, he says. I've made the magic really work, he says. No more foolish rituals. I stripped the magic to basics. Access without liability, he says. I'll teach you. Learn well, my son, for you shall take my place. Be likened under me, fashioned by my hand, entering the golden dawn with me and carrying it to the stars and beyond, he says. Scarlet women of your own, he says, plenty, for they are the secrets of the doorway. Use and consume. Feast, drink the power through them, waste and discard them. Sex by will, he says. Love by will, he says. No caring, no sharing, no feelings, none, he says. Sex and love reversed, he says. Blind love through sex. Love isn't sex. Love is no good. It puts you at effect point, he says. Sex is power, he says. No, sex is the root to power, he says. The route to the doorway to power, he says. Find your scarlet woman, he says. Create your causation, he says. Make your own scarlet woman, he says. Scarlet, I ask? Yes, scarlet. The blood of their bodies, the blood of their soul. Release the will from bondage. Bend the body, bend the mind, bend their will, he says. Beat back the past. Free your will. Unfetter the will from the past, from the future. The present is the only thing. No consequences. None answering. No guilt. Nothing is wrong in the present. The will is free. No feelings. No effort. Pure thought. Thinking alone separated. The will postulating the will, he says. Will, sex, love, blood, door, power, will, logical, the doorway of plenty, the great door of the great beast, him, you, me, our will, our power, our reality, ours alone. He repeats an incantation, invokes the door opening to the realm of the beast. I vomit, I hurt, I feel the blood flood through the doorway. I shine. Father says, never tell, or much worse will happen. He commands me to read. I keep trancing. Father has commanded, I read the book of the law, the sacred magic of Abra Melin, the sex magic of the 9th degree of the OTO, and later, many more textbooks, many more hours of learning, a practice with Dad, practice alone in use, an academy of religious arts and sciences, the academy of power, Hubbard power, not Scientology power, great power, beast power. Dad was correct, very right on. It worked exactly as he said. It still does and always will. This is the most important part, I think. People mistake L. Ron Hubbard and his Scientology. They see the apparency and not the actuality. By design, Scientology does not work as stated, but as intended by its creator, L. Ron Hubbard, to keep the doorway open, to remain in the realm of the great beast, to feed the hunger of the will, his will. When he emptied the purse of man in the heart of women, it seeks onward and outward, appetite, forever appetite. Scientology is the snare, the passion flower, the cloak of lights, the glow of power, a power always wanting, always needing, the will never satisfied. Keep the books under lock and key, he says. I do for years. I burn them as a symbolic gesture many more years later, for I have become my own exorcist. It's L. Ron Hubbard Jr. Pretty fucking sexy bedtime story, right? I told you it was dark. That's actually not as dark as it gets. I'm not going to talk about what happens later in the memoir because I'm on camera, but I can maybe talk about it a little. We'll see, maybe after some drinks. But it's what's interesting to me is the way it's written is almost this like punishing, repetitious, trance, almost like disjointed poetic style. And you could argue some of that is just strange writing and that Junior was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But I think a lot of it is that what he kept maintaining for years, and you got to mind you that when Junior came out and he first started talking about black magic, people laughed at him. Like, the fuck are you talking about? I mean, I've seen interviews where they're like, literally like, this woman is sitting back and completely skeptical, and she's like, what are you're talking about sacrifice, talking about like, you know, this is absurd. And I think to even a lot of Scientologists or even ex-Scientologists, especially independent Scientologists, is that I don't believe that it was just some like passing sorority phase of like the high school kid who, you know, smokes a couple joints and does a few Wiccan rituals. Is what you hear over and over in this, even if you discount all of the magic and all the OTO shit and all of that, what you hear over and over is basically the manifesto of a sociopath, is that there are no consequences, there's no guilt, no one else matters except your will, what the fuck you want, and take it. Smash it out of people, use women, use their minds, use them as portals for whatever you want. And that is absolutely dead on clear. And if you see the actions of L. Ron Hubbard till this dying day, that was what he exercised over and over and over again, is that money was not what he was after. That was part of it. You know what I mean? The same way as I'm sure scotch and nice boats and, you know, women before he went impotent and everything else, is that, but it's really minds was his currency. That he was not able to establish $1 or 1 cent unless he was able to enslave your mind to a point where you had to actually work it so it would function where you'd actually enslave yourself. You know, you look at OT3, you have people sitting in a room talking to alien souls that are possessing themselves. No one forced you in that room. You're not at gunpoint. No one's telling, you know, I mean, you're doing it to yourself because at that point, he's so worked you into his will into becoming his puppet. And I think what a lot of this makes clear, and I think what Junior was always trying to point out, is that early on that was always the blueprint. And it never changed. That everything else was costume and set decorations and, you know, some just razzle-dazzle. It was vaudeville bullshit showmanship. But at the end core level, and always in the end, it was L. Ron literally doing the exact same thing he typed and wrote in his own journals of, I want to smash my name in history. And he did it. And the real tragedy, and what I think is important about everybody who's here in this room today, and what I try to point out often, is that the fucker got away with it. He never saw a day in jail. He was never in court. He died a fucking millionaire. He died with his own private army, and now an army that is still defending him. You would think that if Scientology had anything valid about it, that anybody in their right fucking mind would remove the biggest detriment to Scientology, which dismantles it, which is L. Ron Hubbard. You have a pathological liar who's been proven conclusively over and over again as your core for everything. So, I mean, if there's an actual science to it, if there's actual beauty to this tech, well, if a liar told you about the technology, remove the liar. But you can't, because everything is so interwoven to constantly still abuse you in the name of L. Ron Hubbard. And ultimately, it's just David Miscavige is stepping into basically just a position that L. Ron had created for himself. And it's not that Miscavige is the disease, Miscavige is just another symptom of the exact same core poison that's always been at the center, which is L. Ron. How am I doing on time? You have a little more time?
About 10 o'clock, 10 minutes left.
10 minutes left. Okay. I think that's enough on this shit. Do you want to hear? So you have two options. We can do some Q&A, or I can read you a piece that is about L. Ron Hubbard's great-great-granddaughter that has nothing to do with Scientology, that may give you fucking hope for some glimmer of hope in the world. Or we can just go right to Q&A. Right? I just figure, I mean, this shit, trust me, well, there's two things I want to talk about very quickly. The Holy Shit Show was a show that I did with Paulette Cooper and Tony Ortega, if you were at. That is actually, I feel, my truest spirit of approaching L. Ron is a whole vaudeville game show that we did where the audience is split in half and they're literally battling against each other. And what you're battling for is the only winning side of it gets invited to an after party known as OT9, which, much like the stage, the trick of it is that I'm actually manipulating the audience openly. But I'm manipulating people who I'm sure at this point, after our 20 years in Sea Org, swear up and down they can never be manipulated. But I mean, these are all vaudeville tricks. Everybody in this room can be manipulated. One of the easiest way to manipulate people is have them compete against each other. It doesn't matter what the reason is. They'll just turn into rabid wolverines and get frothing mad and go nuts. So I divided the audience into forks and spoons, right? And then you have them rally against each other and moon each other, and we start different contests, and L. Ron Hubbard is a character who comes out on stage in his full Commodore outfit, and we had, Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes burlesque. We had a whole Scarlet Woman, hot, sexy burlesque act, and it was fucking amazing. But those videos will be released at some point, and that there are many times watching that show that Paulette and Tori and Spanky, who are all there in the audience, they were like, holy shit, I can't believe what you're doing in here. Because it was just swinging at Scientology that I'm sure they could have just taken a machine gun to my entire cast if they would have seen that. So that's the next installment. I'm not grimly fucking serious every day of my life. So I'm going to do this piece really quick, and then we'll do some question and answer. Does that work? All right, just because this shit is really depressing to me. So I'm going to give you a glimmer of hope. So this is about my daughter, who was also L. Ron Hubbard's progeny, which to her is just absurd, and you know what I mean? But is that at a young age, and I think one of the reasons why I've always felt a connection with L. Ron is that, as I talked about in that piece, is that he was a writer. So in a way, he was an inspiration to me because oh, he's a writer. I didn't know he wrote the fucking Bible of the Antichrist. I didn't know that for a while. That took some time, but I got there. But anyway, this is just something to at least alleviate the mood. How many parents do I have in the house? Holy shit. Wow. Normally it's a few lonely hands. How many of y'all are still with your original partner? How many of y'all are not? This is for you. All right. Fuck the other happy people. All right. Nothing brings divorced families together like a preschool sing-along. Today, I'm a proud papa. My daughter's graduating preschool, and I want it to be a happy memory, so she'll graduate high school like her mom and dad didn't. Today, in a church in Vacaville, California, a portrait of Jesus smiles down on the crowd of parents mobbing the pews. We're one big demolition derby of custody battles and buried resentment that screeches to a halt at the sign, slow down. Children crossing, because it's all about the kids. All about the fucking kids. In here, everybody wears a frozen smile like a taxidermist did our makeup. Disney characters and diaper sales are the small talk life raft, and you would be fucking shocked how many times Goofy and Pampers saved a soccer mom from swinging on the woman her husband left them for. And I'm no exception. I got a new girlfriend cradled in my arms who loves me enough to brave this hazing ritual. Gentlemen, no matter what the fuck they say, nobody ever wants to meet the baby mama, especially when you're considering a vasectomy. I spy my ex in the back pews, her black hair gleaming like a knife in the stained glass light. As you walk towards her, my girlfriend realizes they're wearing the same outfits. Girlfriend in red. Ex in red, girlfriend in pink. Now, I hear in the world of women that this is a declaration of war that's fought with catty stares and sniper subtitles that men thankfully don't have the radar for. Her new husband is big, tall, and handsome. The kind of man I always knew I wasn't. As we shake hands, the wedding ring he bought today clinks against my knuckles, so I just give him the best smile I got, as I'm so happy someone finally volunteered to be her umbilical cord to reality. His own baby mama's here, a dirty blonde with split ends and an assault record against her new boyfriend who keeps flinching every time her hands come out of her pockets. 3 couples, separated by 1 penis and 1 vagina, like an evil chain letter that mails itself every time you fuck somebody new. Nobody wants to talk. We'd all got evidence to stand up in court. So instead we stand around saying, "Oh, it is so good to meet you. I've heard so much about you," which is parent code speak for, "You couldn't pull out of that." The church organ kicks on. A Ritalин's fan base file in. A march of drooling munchkins falling all over each other. A little boy keeps wiping boogers on his bow tie. A little girl has to pee and keeps grabbing her crotch. Scanning the future leaders of America, I thank God this graduation is in a church, because some of these kids don't stand a fucking prayer. At the end of the line is my beautiful daughter, Nadia, grinning lipstick ear to ear, wearing a dress that she's managed to get mud on in the 1 hour she's been wearing it on a day it's not even raining, and she managed to say, "Hi, Daddy," before she trips and falls and takes out a whole row face first into a pew. The preschool has arranged for an awards ceremony where each child will be given a prophetic career, like future comedian because Jerry's fart jokes always floor the class, or future cheerleader because Tori's got such school spirit. As they go down the list of the future carpenters, future football players, and mayors, some of the parents start to get nervous, thinking their kid might win future syringe porcupine because Johnny's always snorting the glue stick, or future pole dancer because Barbie makes Barbie strip for Ken. Finally, they say Nadia DeWolf, and I aim my video camera like a hunter looking for the best shot. They bring her up to the stage, her face already blooming purple in embarrassment with her scuffed and scabbed knees and her shaking little shoes. And the school teacher says, "Well, as Nadia has such a big imagination and just loves to tell stories, we award Nadia DeWolf the Future Author Award." A writer, like her dad. Now, I would have been happy with anything, all right? We could have said a future cult leader. I would have bought her a book of Dianetics myself. But a writer, like me and my baby mama's eyes meet. And an important, beautiful truth is established in that magic moment. My DNA is winning! All of my sins have been forgiven with a certificate my daughter might not even remember. You see, parents ain't nothing but prologue. And my life is a rough draft I'm still writing into revision. But at least I know there's a future author who can one day pick up a pen and write her own happy ending. That's L. Ron's granddaughter right there. That's her great-granddaughter. You know, just a momentary break from Scarlet Women and the Great Horror of the Beast and all that fucking madness. So, yes, Q&A, question.
On? Yep, okay, great. Listen, tell you one thing I was thinking. I don't think we do this often at the seminary where I teach. but this was incredibly powerful and creative. Incredible. Thanks, Jamie. Okay. Okay, questions? How about I'm over here. I'll come over there in a minute. Any questions here? Yep. And say your name. That's nice to know.
Yes, it's true. I'm related to L. Ron Hubbard, yes.
Hey, Jamie, my name's Brian. You obviously have big plans for the memoir, which I don't think you want to go completely into, but I am anxious to know whether you see it published someday.
Well, the history of the memoir is very dangerous because from what I understand, I still need a little clarification on it, but I believe that when Junior, after his father died, the church basically approached Junior and they said, look, we can fuck with you forever. Your dad's dead. Your battle's done. Said, how about we just give you some money, shut the fuck up, and you're gonna sign over everything. And ultimately, they pressured him to do that. There are many, many, many times that were early on, and I think that Junior is kind of a misunderstood character in a way because it wasn't about money, right? A lot of the Scientology kind of myth is that Junior's just like, give me some money, Dad. A lot of it is that he had a connection with his dad, which I think you can understand even from the memoir. Their connection is very personal. You know, I mean, you can just hear it in his voice. It's like he's very direct. He doesn't want to do. I mean, he used to like beat people up for his dad. He helped design early courses with his dad. I mean, he was his muscle basically. So I think that later in his life, that he had a very conflicted relationship with his dad. And the problem was, is anytime he'd start to come out against his father, they'd immediately threaten his children. So Bent has told me a story that when they were in court down in LA, that they took him off into a side room. They laid out pictures of every one of my aunts and uncles, and that were all alone. They pointed at all these pictures and they said, look, if you want to take this there's going to be some consequences. And at a certain point, he pulled back. You know, he pulled back because they were, I mean, that's all my aunts and uncles tell me stories of that. They all remember being followed. They remembered, you know, days that they'd come home and Junior would be sitting there and he'd be like, all right, time for everybody to learn how to use a gun. You know, and they're like, why are we learning a gun? He's like, don't worry about that, but this is how it works, this is where it is, come on over, you know what I mean? And they were, I mean, he moved constantly. And so the memoir, the rights, I'm not sure, may actually belong to Scientology in a way, though I doubt they're going to do anything with it. There are a few copies around, and there's a beautiful thing called the internet. So I don't know. Maybe a copy will get stolen out of a window someday and get uploaded. Who the fuck knows? I don't know. A lot of it is I actually want to talk with some of my family about it and see how they feel. I'm not sure that everyone's going to agree, but in a way, partly why I read what I read is that I think it's really important to illuminate not only who Junior was as just a human being, but that their connection was more than just sort of the surface of, you know, disavowed son goes against dad, wants a bunch of money, goes away mad. You know what I mean? That's the simplistic story of it. And I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And so I'm not sure. The answer is I'm not sure yet. So that's only the second time I've ever even read parts of it out loud, and I've only had it in my possession. And if Scientology's watching, it's in several places now. But it's so some of it is figuring out what to do with it, because it gets a lot darker. It gets a lot darker than that. How many people thought that was dark? Right? It gets a lot darker than that, if you can believe it. It gets into specific violence, rituals, things like that.
You know, it's not that dark because, like, that's Sunday school material from when I was growing up. Yeah. Okay.
It's just the revelation.
This is Spanky.
Hi, Jamie. And now, Nibs was very young when he worked with Alron, right? Like, he was like 20, 22 at the max.
He was like 18 when he
And he was
showed up.
handling finance for the organization and everything. I just want to clarify how old he was. Just a child.
Yeah, he was young, and he shows up and he's like, Dad, I'm here. And his dad had just gotten rich. His dad was in full force. Dianetics had just started. And he'd never even grown up with his dad. His dad had, you know, Nibs was born and Dad was gone. You know what I mean? So that's another thing too, is that you have to understand on a very human level. It's like you show up, you're with your dad for the first time, and your dad's like, hey, come on in here. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, you're looking good. You're growing up big. He's like, tell you what, I got this problem over here. You mind go handle that? And he's like, sure. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, you solved a good problem. Let's go solve some more problems. And you know what I mean? And that, how Junior understood a lot of fair game later, he felt that he had helped design the prologue to that entire program. And he would say that his entire life. He would tell his lawyers, he's like, this is what they're gonna do to me. They're gonna do this, 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 and this. And they're like, that's fucking insane. No one does that to people. And he's like, yes, they do. I used to do it. This is exactly what they're gonna do. And they would just do it over and over. You know what I mean? So in a way, it was almost more irritating because he felt like he was always fighting against little shadow puppets of his father. And he had been there early, and that's why he even says, like, I was in there in the beginning of the beginning. You know what I mean? Of that. He understood the direction it was going, and then for the rest of his life. And I think near the end, he actually wanted to, in a weird way, actually find out what was going wrong with his father. You know, his father had vanished and was going off the rails, and was obviously something was wrong with L. Ron, and there was, you know what I mean? And more the inner circle was starting to like countermand L. Ron and isolate him more and more. And so in a way, he wanted to find out what had happened to his father. Mm-hmm.
Okay, over here.
Was there much more to the book? Did he ever finish it?
He did not finish it. No, he did not finish it. There's more.
And finally, what did you think of the movie, The Master?
I thought two things. I thought cinematically, I was like, you know, the ending was absolutely just felt super neutral, and it just kind of felt like it started maybe with a spark, and then Tom Cruise came in and, you know, flexed a bicep, and then they're like, all right, we'll soft pedal back everything. I mean, the performances are amazing. I think it's a fantastic director. I just felt that it's not even, people would thought, they're like, oh, did you want it to just criticize the cult? That wasn't even that. I just felt that it was like the way the movie ended, you know, I mean, it just sort of left with just kind of a shrug. You know, the last image is basically Joaquin Phoenix, just like, oh, I'm sorry to spoil it for you. You know, he sleeps with a girl drunk, and then he's passes out on beach. That's the end of it. There's no real arc to it, you know, and yeah. So, I mean, it was all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Mark. Tell me one thing. Your grandfather, great-grandfather, you would have gone through memoir, and you have your father there. And so what was the biggest fear he has? I mean, what they were after? His contribution towards the text, or his inheritance? What was the biggest fear he has because of which the church will go after him?
Whose fear? L. Ron or L. Ron Jr.?
Junior.
What was his biggest fear?
Yeah. I mean, for example, I mean, what is he had a great contribution towards his father, whether it was basically improving him the text or the course's design or anything else. So what was thinking about that, why they would come after him? Because of his contribution, because of copyright issues, because of his involvement, or because he inherited the wealth?
I think a lot of it was that I think that the last time that L. Ron Sr. ever talked about his black magic roots was to his son. And I think after that, he never mentions it again. You know, I mean, you find a few glimpses of it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you find a few early glimpses of it, then he never mentions it again. But you see its symbology and its protocol and its systems interwoven through all of Scientology. And then even as you go up to OT8, it's basically, which I thought was brilliantly put by John yesterday, is that it comes full circle. And so that to me is, I think, is so integral to it, is that whether or not you believe in magic, I don't. Other people do. That's fine. That's fair. But is that, to me, it's more that is literally the groundwork to it. And I think that line of that Scientology doesn't work as it appears, it works as it was intended. That it was always intended to fuck you up. You know what I mean? It was always intended to systematically break you down, and that's why it just keeps going. It keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going, because there is no end to it, because once you're deep enough into it, you've been dismantled. And that's what I think a lot of L. Ron believed that. I think he believed that by destroying people and sort of like taking their essence in a way, that gave him power. And I think that Junior knew that early on, and they actually, from what I've been hearing, they actually had secret communication back and forth for many years, all the way up until really near the end. Even when they were battling, they would have secret communications, they had codes and so forth. And I think that Junior really came out swinging near the end because he realized his father was actually truly gone, whether he was dead or had completely snapped. And that's why Junior was like, put himself fully in the spotlight, because it was no longer a father-son relationship, is that then he was dealing with just all these puppets, and they made him sick.
Okay, Steve Hassan has the last question, and then he gets on a plane to Europe. And John Atak's going to end with unifying something here. We'll take a break, and then Jerry Armstrong will be here.
Jerry fucking Armstrong.
I just wanted to say I was on People Are Talking in Boston with L. Ron Jr., and he told me many of these stories, and he was very sincere.
When was this?
This was in the 80s. This was around the time I think he did a Penthouse interview,
Yep, Penthouse,
etc. He was being public, but he was telling me, I was talking about the Moonies and mind control, and he was talking about how dark it was and how deranged it was and how L. Ron was like super high on drugs when he was writing Dianetics. And anyway, my point or my question is, there's got to be archival footage of him talking about L. Ron Jr., at least at Boston People Are Talking, that I think would be really good to try to dig up.
Absolutely.
And use. So
Yeah,
just
and
putting it out there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that he did a full round of interviews. You're talking about Junior, right? Yeah. Yeah, that he did all kinds of rounds of publicity and everything else. And what really hurts my heart to watch is that he was telling the truth. Nearly everything that he was saying that sounded absolutely outlandish, batshit insane. I will absolutely give you that. Someone walks you up and they're like, hey, you met my friend Johnny? He's a black magic fucking warlock, thinks he's the Antichrist, and it'd be like, you sound like the crazy one, you know what I mean? Johnny's a nice guy. He runs a ship and he's got a little Navy outfit, and you know what I mean? And nearly everything that Junior was saying, it's possible he embellished or exaggerated a hint, but the core of it was absolutely dead on true. And I think that it gets, and I understand that. If I have a short time for a media interview, I usually don't go into black magic because people are just like, what the fuck, you know what I mean? Like, get out of here. Like, they understand violent force, they understand mind control, sort of, they understand robbery. These are things that people understand, but I think for the theological underpinnings of Scientology, that the black magic, it's more important, as John said even to me today, it says it's not important about what you believe about black magic. What's important is that L. Ron Hubbard believed that, and that he believed it as a device of power, and that using people as an instrument and a conduit for his own power, and this obsession with will, that it was all about your will and your will alone. And literally every single action that he ever undertook was just L. Ron walking into any room, just smashing his name all over the place.
And I just want to make one last comment. I know we're running late, but when the one thing that didn't resonate for me in your entire presentation was when you said that he got away with it. But you then qualified and said he wasn't put in jail, which was true. But I think he was a very tortured, pathetic soul, and that in so many ways.
I agree, but I mean, I agree but the issue I always have with that is this sort of karmic retribution thing, because Ted Bundy died on death row, but he was fit as a fiddle, and he got, vegetarian meals every day, and, in the end, he's got to play a sociopathic endgame. And that I think that L. Ron was sick, that he hadn't seen a doctor in a very long time because of his own beliefs, that he had put himself on the run and on the lam. But wouldn't it have been nice if L. Ron got dragged into a court? You know what I mean? That to me, though, is the horrible moral of the story, is that, like, I don't think that it's like, I really don't feel that L. Ron got his comeuppance. You know what I mean? How do you even put on a scale of lonely man who's got suitcases full of cash and bad teeth and, losing his mind, with the damage and wreckage that he just destroyed thousands, millions, families, minds, children, and over and over.
I get your point.
Yeah.
Totally. I just think,
Well, and I think also the point of why I state it is it's to state that he got away with it. How long did they get away with it? You know what I mean? How long does Scientology get to bully and pummel people into it? And everybody in this room knows how scary that's been for decades. You know what I mean? And that they're absolutely as terrifying as you've heard. They are as savage as you know. But I think finally, only in the past couple of years, there's been this turning point where people are realizing if there's enough of us, maybe these fuckers don't get to get away with it anymore. So, sorry to cuss so much. You done? Thank you. Give it up for John for also helping to put this conference together. It's been amazing.
That was amazing. I mean, that was amazing. That was poetically amazing, apart from anything else. I have read The Story of Me, and there is a copy safe elsewhere, on another continent, in another galaxy. When I was in contact with Nibs, I just think of him as Nibs, which is the family name for him, Hubbard Jr. I had a friend who was a phone operator, and he would ring Nibs up, and they'd talk for 2 or 3 hours at a time and write down all of the answers to my questions. And he'd come back and he'd give me this stuff, and I'd look at it and go, this cannot possibly be true. That was in 1984, when I was at the beginning of my journey. And so anything that he said that I used had to be corroborated separately. Years went by, and I found out a lot more. The Story of Me has in it, I mean, that's the poetry at the beginning and the outline of what he was saying about himself. And it's beautifully written. When I read it, I thought this man was a much better writer than his father, who had no poetry whatsoever in him. But the book has drug dealing, mafia involvement, murder. And the sense that I eventually got, and which came to me to seem most important, was Ron Hubbard's master was the master Therion, Aleister Crowley. He dedicated his life to Crowley from his first encounter with him, which I believe was in his teens with the writings of Crowley. Crowley had this thing that you had to develop the will, and you had to hone the will. In Buddhism, you have the concept of one-pointedness of mind, and all meditation is towards one-pointedness of mind. But in Buddhism, the aim is compassion. For Crowley and for Hubbard, the aim was power. To elevate the will so high that this joke that we saw today of projecting intention into an ashtray would be real. That you would be able to control anybody with your will. You wouldn't have to tell them what to do, you would just make them do things. I said earlier, Scientology is a magical working. It's not a ritual. A ritual is a small part of a working. A working is the rituals that add together to make a specific outcome. The outcome was meant to be that L. Ron Hubbard would somehow be elevated to become the single source, the word he used for himself, of the universe. It's childish. It's infantile. I don't believe in magic except for the magic of human love. You know, I don't believe in body thetans. I don't believe in any of that, and I have no reason to, having had 9 years of having it pumped into me as an aspiration. But I failed to say that Scientology is a sacrifice, that power is achieved traditionally by magicians by sacrifice. And in this case, the element of sacrifice is not physical. Scientology is a form of spiritual vampirism. And when you see people, as they come out, it's as if their souls have been drawn out of them. They can't make decisions. They believe all of this nonsense, and they may spend decades afterwards as independent Scientologists. Now, if there was ever a misnomer, it is that word independent. They are dependent Scientologists. There are people who are still so caught up in it that if you say to them, I think L. Ron Hubbard, no, you're a bad person, how dare you say that? I've been attacked a certain amount in the last 30 years in print, which is upsetting, frankly, and unpleasant. But I have to always look at it and go, this person is unhealed. And L. Ron Hubbard got his claws into them. I think I was going to say what Steve said, which is, you know, he did get his comeuppance because he didn't have a happy day in his life. He was never in the world. He was so drugged out, so freaked out, and so physically ill all of his life. You know, Cyril Vosper, the great Cyril Vosper, he used to be stopped by body routers on the street, you know, the people getting you to do a free personality test. And at some point, he enjoyed this. He was a mischievous man, a lovely man. And he'd say to them, I knew L. Ron Hubbard. Oh my God, you knew L. Ron Hubbard? That's incredible. Well, what do you remember about him? Well, the thing I particularly remember, I met him many times, the thing I particularly remember is he had the filthiest breath I've ever smelled because his teeth were rotting in his head. So he was a miserable man, and he believed somehow that he could cure himself and achieve power by controlling others. And in the end, his only joy was the sociopathic joy of seeing the damage he was causing to other people. So Scientology is a sacrifice. It's a way of controlling and destroying the souls of human beings, because that was all that meant anything. To Hubbard. A guy went onto the ship in '68 who was a journalist, and he sat with Hubbard before recording him, and he wrote to me a couple of years ago, and he said, I've always regretted that Hubbard wouldn't say on the record what he said privately. And what he said privately, this journalist said to him, it's a scam, isn't it? This is on the ship in Bizerti in Tunisia in 1968. It's a scam. And Hubbard said, of course it's a scam. Don't be so foolish. The journalist was a little surprised. He hadn't expected an honest answer from a dishonest man. So he said, you must be the loneliest man in the world. And Hubbard said, yes, I am so sad. I can't tell anybody how I'm screwing them up. And he said to him, well, why do you do it? And this is the bit that he so wished he'd been able to record. He's still sorry about it, you know, right now. This was 1968 when he was a 25-year-old. And he still feels that he's failed the world because he didn't get this on the record. And Hubbard said, well, it's very nice being able to give your wife $10,000 at the end of the day, which is what, you know, $250,000 now? But he said, the thing I particularly like is reeling in the clever ones. And when he told me that, I had the image of a 10-year-old at school who nobody likes, who's going to get his own back. And that cowering, cringing coward was L. Ron Hubbard. And that's the life that he led. Jim Dinkowski says that when he was nursing him for 3 months, was it 3 months, Jerry? Tell me I'm right. In 1973 in Queens, that he couldn't understand Hubbard's low self-esteem. There's an interview. Sorry? 9 months in all. He couldn't understand that Hubbard felt that he was nothing, that he'd got nowhere, and he'd have these terrible bouts of morose despair. That's the life he led. That's who he was. So, in the end, there's nothing there, just shadows and vapors, smoke, mirrors. A man who achieved nothing other than increasing the despair of humanity. So I just wanted to put that reflection there. You're right, he should have gone to prison, but even an L. Ron Hubbard, even a Ted Bundy, or Jeffrey Dahmer, or whoever, perhaps could have had redemption. When I heard that L. Ron Hubbard had died, you know, I was long gone from the tech and I was being harassed on a daily basis, I wept, because he died completely unredeemed. And I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you.
As John and I put this thing together, it was just thrilling to hear from everybody who's here that you're coming. It was wonderful to work out with Jamie that he was going to fly in from San Francisco. And then I met Jerry 4 years ago and spent quite a few days with him in Chilliwack, BC, and had a great time. So tonight we've gone from high octane, and we're going to take a break till 25 after, and then we'll be with the one and only Jerry Armstrong. So see you at, come on back at 25 after. We're a little late, but this is a high energy voltage night.